Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mattala sadhujana vishaya range pujala ragapa. Oh, sorry. Everyone could either come in here or we're trying to fix it. We'll fix it. No, I'm not going ahead. I'm just trying to entertain everybody. Matala sadhujana vishaya range pujala ragapat gauravabange. You got it now? Thank you. We're continuing our reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We're at Canto 3, Chapter 32. And this chapter is entitled Entanglement and Fruitive Activities. We're taking up text 2. Such persons are ever bereft of devotional service due to being too attached to sense gratification. And therefore, although they perform various kinds of sacrifices and take great vows to satisfy the demigods and forefathers, they are not interested in Krishna consciousness, devotional service. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 7.20, it is said that persons who worship demigods have lost their intelligence. Kamaistaiste rita jnana. They are very much attracted to sense gratification, and therefore they worship the demigods. It is, of course, recommended in the Vedic scriptures that if one wants money, health, or education, then he should worship the various demigods. A materialistic person has manifold demands, and thus there are manifold demigods to satisfy his senses. The Grihamatis who want to continue a prosperous materialistic way of life generally worship the demigods or the forefathers by offering pinda, or respectful oblations. Such persons are bereft of Krishna consciousness and are not interested in devotional service to the Lord. This kind of so-called pious and religious man is the result of impersonalism. The impersonalists maintain that the supreme absolute truth has no form and that one can imagine any form he likes for his benefit and worship in that way. Therefore, the Grihamatis or materialistic men say that they can worship any form of a demigod as worship of the Supreme Lord. Especially amongst the Hindus, those who are meat eaters prefer to worship goddess Kali because it is prescribed that one can sacrifice a goat before that goddess. They maintain that whether one worships the goddess Kali or the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu or any demigod, the destination is the same. This is first-class rascaldom, and such people are misled. But they prefer this philosophy. Bhagavad Gita does not accept such rascaldom, and it is clearly stated that such methods are meant for persons who have lost their intelligence. The same judgment is confirmed here, and the word kama mudha, meaning one who has lost his sense or is infatuated by the lust of attraction for sense gratification, is used. Kama mudhas are bereft of Krishna consciousness and devotional service, and are infatuated by a strong desire for sense gratification. The worshippers of demigods are condemned both in Bhagavad Gita and in Srimad Bhagavatam. Such materialistic persons attracted by sense gratification and devoted to the forefathers and demigods can be elevated to the moon, where they drink an extract of the soma plant. They again return to this planet. The moon is considered one of the planets of the heavenly kingdom. One can be promoted to this planet by executing different sacrifices recommended in the Vedic literature, such as pious activities and worshipping the demigods and forefathers with rigidity and vows. But one cannot remain there for a very long time. Life on the moon is said to last 10,000 years according to the calculation of the demigods. The demigods' time is calculated in such a way that one day, 12 hours, is equal to 6 months on this planet. It is not possible to reach the moon by any material vehicle like a Sputnik, but persons who are attracted by material enjoyment can go to the moon by pious activities. In spite of being promoted to the moon, however, one has to come back to this earth again when the merits of his works in sacrifice are finished. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9.21. Te tam bhuktva swargalokam vishalam shinye punye martyalokam vishanti. All the planets of the materialistic persons, including all the heavenly planets such as the moon, are vanquished when the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari goes to his bed of serpents, which is known as Ananta Shesha. The materially attached are very eager to promote themselves to the heavenly planets such as the moon. There are many heavenly planets to which they aspire just to achieve more and more material happiness by getting a long duration of life and the paraphernalia for sense enjoyment. But the attached persons do not know that even if one goes to the highest planet, Brahmaloka, destruction exists there also. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that one can even go to the Brahmaloka, but still he will find the pangs of birth, death, disease, and old age. Only by approaching the Lord's abode, the Vaikuntha Loka, does one not take birth again in this material world. The Griyamadhis, or materialistic persons, however, do not like to use this advantage. They would prefer to transmigrate perpetually from one body to another, or from one planet to another. They do not want the eternal blissful life in knowledge in the kingdom of God. There are two kinds of dissolutions. One dissolution takes place at the end of the life of Brahma, and at that time all the planetary systems, including the heavenly systems, are dissolved in water and enter into the body of Garbhodakshai, Vishnu, who lies on the Garbhodak ocean on the bed of serpents called Shesha. In the other dissolution, which occurs at the end of Brahma's day, all the lower planetary systems are destroyed. When Lord Brahma rises after his night, these lower planetary systems are again created. The statement in Bhagavad Gita that persons who worship the demigods have lost their intelligence is confirmed in this verse. These less intelligent persons do not know that even if they are promoted to the heavenly planets, at the time of dissolution, they themselves, the demigods and all their planets, will be annihilated. They have no information that eternal blissful life can be attained. Those who are intelligent and are of purified consciousness are completely satisfied in Krishna consciousness. Freed from the modes of material nature, they do not act for sense gratification. Rather, since they are situated in their own occupational duties, they act as one is expected to act. The first-class example of this type of man is Arjuna. Arjuna was a Kshatriya, and his occupational duty was to fight. Generally, kings fight to extend their kingdoms, which they rule for sense gratification. But as far as Arjuna is concerned, he declined to fight for his own sense gratification. He said that although he could get a kingdom by fighting with his relatives, he did not want to fight with them. But when he was ordered by Kṛṣṇa and convinced by the teachings of Bhagavad Gita that his duty was to satisfy Kṛṣṇa, then he fought. Thus he fought not for his sense gratification, but for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Persons who work at their prescribed duties, not for sense gratification, but for gratification of the Supreme Lord, are called nisanga, freed from the influence of the modes of material nature. Nyasya karmana indicates that the results of their activities are given to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such persons appear to be acting on the platform of their respective duties, but such activities are not performed for personal sense gratification. Rather, they are performed for the Supreme Person. Such devotees are called prashanta, which means completely satisfied. Shuddha cetasa means Krishna conscious. Their consciousness has become purified. In unpurified consciousness, one thinks of himself as the Lord of the universe, but in purified consciousness, one thinks himself the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Putting oneself in that position of eternal servitorship to the Supreme Lord and working for him perpetually, one actually becomes completely satisfied. As long as one works for his personal sense gratification, he will always be full of anxiety. That is the difference between ordinary consciousness and Krishna consciousness. By executing one's occupational duties, acting with detachment and without a sense of proprietorship or false egoism, one is posted in one's constitutional position by dint of complete purification of consciousness. and thus by executing so-called material duties, he can easily enter into the kingdom of God. Here the word nivritti dharma nirata means constantly engaging in executing religious activities for detachment. There are two kinds of religious performances. One is called pravritti dharma, which means the religious activities performed by the Grihamatis for elevation to the higher planets or for economic prosperity, the final aim of which is sense gratification. Every one of us who has come to this material world has the sense of overlordship. This is called pravritti. But the opposite type of religious performance, which is called nivritti, is to act for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Engaged in devotional service in Krishna consciousness, one has no proprietorship claim, nor is one situated in the false egoism of thinking that he is God or the master. He always thinks himself the servant. That is the process of purifying consciousness. With pure consciousness only can one enter into the kingdom of God. Materialistic persons in their elevated condition can enter any one of the planets within this material world, but all are subjected to dissolution over and over again. Through the path of illumination, such liberated persons approach the complete personality of Godhead, who is the proprietor of the material and spiritual worlds and is the supreme cause of their manifestation and dissolution. The word Surya Dwarena means by the illumined path, or through the sun planet. The illuminated path is devotional service. It is advised in the Vedas not to pass through the darkness, but to pass through the sun planet. It is also recommended here that by traversing the illuminated path, one can be freed from the contamination of the material modes of nature. By that path, one can enter into the kingdom where the completely perfect personality of Godhead resides. The words Purusham Vishvato Mukham mean the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is all perfect. All living entities, other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are very small, although they may be big by our calculation. Everyone is infinitesimal. And therefore, in the Vedas, the Supreme Lord is called the Supreme Eternal amongst all eternals. He is the proprietor of the material and spiritual worlds and the supreme cause of manifestation. Material nature is only the ingredient because actually the manifestation is caused by his energy. The material energy is also his energy, just as the combination of father and mother is the cause of childbirth. So the combination of the material energy and the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of the manifestation of the material world. The efficient cause, therefore, is not matter, but the Lord himself. Worshippers of the Hiranyagarbha expansion of the Personality of Godhead remain within this material world until the end of two praradas, when Lord Brahma also dies. Purport: one dissolution is at the end of Brahma's day, and one is at the end of Brahma's life. Brahma dies at the end of two praradas, at which time the entire material universe is dissolved. Persons who are worshippers of Hiranyagarbha, the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, do not directly approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead in Vaikuntha. They remain within this universe on Satyaloka or other higher planets until the end of the life of Brahma. Then, with Brahma, they are elevated to the spiritual kingdom. The word Parasyapara Chintaka mean always thinking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or being always Krishna conscious. When we speak of Krishna, this refers to the complete category of Vishnu Tattva. Krishna includes the three Purusha incarnations, namely Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and Kshirodakshay Vishnu, as well as all the incarnations taken together. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. Ramadi Muti Shukalani Amena Tishtan. Lord Krishna is perpetually situated with his many expansions, such as Rama, Nrsimha, Vaman, Madhusudan, Vishnu, and Narayan. He exists with all his plenary portions and the portions of his plenary portions, and each of them is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words Parasa Parachintaka mean those who are fully Krishna conscious. Such persons enter directly into the kingdom of God, the Vaikuntha planets, or if they are worshippers of the plenary portion Garbhadakshay Vishnu, they remain within this universe until its dissolution, and after that they enter. After experiencing the inhabitable time of the three modes of material nature known as two prarardhas, Lord Brahma closes the material universe, which is covered by layers of earth, water, air, fire, ether, mind, ego, etc., and goes back to Godhead. It's like a shop. You put a sign on the closed. The word avyakritam is very significant in this verse. The same meaning is stated in Bhagavad Gita in the word sanatana. This material world is vyakrita, or subject to changes, and it finally dissolves. But after the dissolution of this material world, the manifestation of the spiritual world, the Sanatan Dham, remains. That spiritual sky is called avyakrita, that which does not change, and there the Supreme Personality of Godhead resides. Well, after ruling over the material universe under the influence of the time element, Lord Brahma desires to dissolve it and enter into the kingdom of God. Others then enter with him. The yogis who become detached from the material world by practice of breathing exercises and control of the mind reach the planet of Brahma, which is far, far away. After giving up their bodies, they enter into the body of Lord Brahma, and therefore, when Brahma is liberated and goes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Supreme Brahman, such yogis can also enter the kingdom of God. By perfecting their yoga practice, yogis can reach the highest planet, Brahmaloka or Satyaloka. And after giving up their material bodies, they can enter into the body of Lord Brahma. Because they are not directly devotees of the Lord, they can get liberation. They cannot get liberation directly. They have to wait until Brahma is liberated, and only then, along with Brahma, are they also liberated. It is clear that as long as a living entity is a worshipper of a particular demigod, his consciousness is absorbed in thoughts of that demigod, and therefore he cannot get direct liberation or entrance into the kingdom of God, nor can he merge into the impersonal effulgence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such yogis or demigod worshippers are subjected to the chance of taking birth again when there is again creation. Text 11. Therefore, my mother, by devotional service, Therefore, my dear mother, by devotional service, take direct shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is seated in everyone's heart. Purport: one can attain direct contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in full Krishna consciousness and revive one's eternal relationship with him as lover, as supreme soul, as son, as friend, or as master. One can reestablish the transcendental loving relationship with the Supreme Lord in so many ways, and that feeling is true oneness. The oneness of the Mayavadi philosophers and the oneness of Vaishnava philosophers are different. The Mayavadi and the Vaishnava philosophers both want to merge into the Supreme, but the Vaishnavas do not lose their identities. They want to keep the identity of lover, parent, friend, or servant. In the transcendental world, the servant and master are one. That is the absolute platform. Although the relationship is servant and master, both the servant and the served stand on the same platform. That is oneness. Lord Kapila advised his mother that she did not need any indirect process. She was already situated in that direct process because the Supreme Lord had taken birth as her son. Actually, she did not need any further instruction because she was already in the perfected stage. Kapiladeva advised her to continue in the same way. He therefore addressed his mother as bhāmini, to indicate that she was already thinking of the Lord as her son. Devahūti is advised by Lord Kapila to take directly to devotional service, Krishna consciousness, because without that consciousness, one cannot become liberated from the clutches of māyā. My dear mother, someone may worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead with a special interest, but even demigods such as Lord Brahma, great sages such as Sanat Kumara, and great munis such as Marichi have to come back to the material world again at the time of creation. When the interaction of the three modes of material nature begins, Brahma, who is the creator of this cosmic manifestation and who is full of Vedic knowledge, and the great sages who are the authors of the spiritual path and the yoga system come back under the influence of the time factor. They are liberated by their non-fruitive activities, and they attain the first incarnation of the Purusha. But at the time of creation, they come back in exactly the same forms and positions as they had previously. That Brahma becomes liberated is known to everyone, but he cannot liberate his devotees. Demigods like Brahma and Lord Shiva cannot give liberation to any living entity. As it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, only one who surrenders unto Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, can be liberated from the clutches of māyā. Brahma is called here Adya Stira Charanam. He is the original first created living entity, and after his own birth he creates the entire cosmic manifestation. He was fully instructed in the matter of creation by the Supreme Lord. Here he is called Vedagarbha, which means that he knows the complete purpose of the Vedas. He is always accompanied by such great personalities as Marichi, Kashyapa, and the seven sages, as well as by great mystic yogis, the Kumaras, and many other spiritually advanced living entities, but he has his own interests separate from the Lord's. Bheda Drishtya means that Brahma sometimes thinks that he is independent of the Supreme Lord, or he thinks of himself as one of the three equally independent incarnations. Brahma is entrusted with creation, Vishnu maintains, and Rudra, Lord Shiva, destroys. The three of them are understood to be incarnations of the Supreme Lord in charge of the three different material modes of nature, but none of them is independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Here the word Bheda Drishtya occurs because Brahma has a slight inclination to think that he is as independent as Rudra. Sometimes Brahma thinks that he is independent of the Supreme Lord, and the worshipper also thinks that Brahma is independent. For this reason, after the destruction of this material world, when there is again creation by the interaction of the material modes of nature, Brahma comes back. Although Brahma reaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the first Purusha incarnation, Mahavishnu, who is full with transcendental qualities, he cannot stay in the spiritual world. The specific significance of his coming back may be noted. Brahma and the great rishis and the great master of yoga, Shiva, are not ordinary living entities. They are very powerful and have all the perfections of mystic yoga, but still they have an inclination to try to become one with the Supreme, and therefore they have to come back. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is accepted that as long as one thinks that he is equal with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is not completely pure. Going up to the first... In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is accepted that as long as one thinks that he is equal with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is not completely purified or knowledgeable. In spite of going up to the first Purusha avatar, Mahavishnu, after the dissolution of this material creation, such personalities again fall down or come back to the material creation. It is a great fall down on the part of the impersonalist to think that the Supreme Lord appears within a material body, and then one should therefore and that one should therefore not meditate upon the form of the Supreme Lord, but should meditate instead on the formless. For this particular mistake, even the great mystic yogis or great stalwart transcendentalists also come back again when there is creation. All living entities other than the impersonalists and monists can directly take to devotional service in full Krishna consciousness and become liberated by developing transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such devotional service develops in the degrees of thinking of the Supreme Lord as Master, as Friend, as Son, and, at last, as Lover. These distinctions in transcendental variegatedness must always be present. Persons who are too addicted to this material world execute their prescribed duties very nicely and with great faith. They daily perform all such prescribed duties with attachment to the fruitive result. Purport: in this and the following 6 verses, the Srimad Bhagavatam criticizes persons who are too materially attached. It is enjoined in the Vedic scriptures that those who are attached to the enjoyment of material facilities have to sacrifice and undergo certain ritualistic performances. They have to observe certain rules and regulations in their daily lives to be elevated to the heavenly planets. It is stated in this verse that such persons cannot be liberated at any time. Those who worship demigods with the consciousness that each and every demigod is a separate god cannot be elevated to the spiritual world. What to speak of persons who are simply attached to duties for the upliftment of their material condition? What to speak of? 17. Such persons impelled by the mode of passion are full of anxieties and always aspire for sense gratification due to uncontrolled senses. They worship the forefathers and are busy day and night improving the economic condition of their family, social, or national life. Such persons are called trivargika, because they are interested in the 3 elevating processes. They are averse to the Supreme Personality of Godhead who can give relief to the conditioned soul. They are not interested in the Supreme Personality's pastimes, which are worth hearing because of his transcendental prowess. Purport. Everyone okay? According to Vedic thought, there are 4 elevating principles, namely religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Persons who are simply interested in material enjoyment make plans to execute prescribed duties. They are interested in the 3 elevating processes of religious rituals, economic elevation and sense enjoyment. By developing their economic condition, they can enjoy material life. Materialistic persons, therefore, are interested in those elevating processes, which are called trivargika. Tri means 3. Vargika means elevating processes. Such materialistic persons are never attracted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rather, they are antagonistic towards him. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is here described as Hari Meda, or he who can deliver one from the cycle of birth and death. Materialistic persons are never interested in hearing about the marvelous pastimes of the Lord. They think that they are fictitious, fictions and stories, and that the Supreme Godhead is also a man of material nature. They are not fit for advancing in devotional service or Krishna consciousness. Such materialistic persons are interested in newspaper stories, novels, and imaginary dramas. The factual activities of the Lord, such as Lord Krishna's acting in the battle of Kurukshetra, or the activities of the Pandavas, or the Lord's activities in Vrindavan or Dwarka, are related in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which are full of the activities of the Lord. But materialistic persons who engage in elevating their position in the material world are not interested in such activities of the Lord. They may be interested in the activities of a great politician or a great rich man of this world, but they are not interested in the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. Such persons are condemned by the supreme order of the Lord because they are averse to the nectar of the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are compared to stool-eating hogs. They give up hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord and indulge in hearing of the abominable activities of materialistic persons. Everyone is addicted to hearing of the activities of another person, whether a politician or a rich man or an imaginary character whose activities are created in a novel. There are so many nonsensical literatures, stories, and books of speculative philosophy. Materialistic persons are very interested in reading such literature. But when they are presented with genuine books of knowledge like Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Vishnu Purana, and other scriptures of the world such as the Bible and Quran, they are not interested. These persons are condemned by the Supreme Order as much as a hog is condemned. The hog is interested in eating stool. If the hog is offered some nice preparation made of condensed milk or ghee, he won't like it. He prefers obnoxious, bad-smelling stool, which he finds very relishable. Materialistic persons are considered condemned because they are interested in hellish activities and not in transcendental activities. The message of the Lord's activities is nectar, and besides that message, any information in which we may be interested is actually hellish. Hellish. Such materialistic persons are allowed to go to the planet called Pitraloka by the southern course of the sun. But they again come back to this planet and take birth in their own families, beginning again the same fruitive activities from birth to the end of life. In Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, verse 21, it is stated that such persons are elevated to the higher planetary systems. As soon as their lifetimes of fruitive activity are finished, they return to this planet, and thus they go up and come down. Those who are elevated to the higher planets again come back into the same family for which they had too much attachment. They are born, and the fruitive activities continue again until the end of life. There are different prescribed rituals from birth until the end of life, and they are very much attached to such activities. When the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they fall down by higher arrangement and again come back to this planet. Just as any person raised to a high position sometimes all of a sudden falls. It is sometimes found that a person elevated to a very high position in government, some service, falls down all of a sudden, and no one can check him. Similarly, after finishing their period of enjoyment, foolish persons who are very much interested in being elevated to the position of president and higher planets also fall down to this planet. The distinction between the elevated position of a devotee and that of an ordinary person attracted to fruitive activities is that when a devotee is elevated to the spiritual kingdom, he never falls down. Whereas an ordinary person falls even if he is elevated to the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Brahmavunaloka, that even if one is elevated to a higher planet, he has to come down again. But Krishna confirms in Bhagavad Gita 8:16, Mam upetet tu kaunteya punarjanma navidyate. Anyone who attains my abode never comes back to this conditioned life of material existence. My dear mother, I therefore advise that you take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for his lotus feet are worth worshipping. Accept this with all devotion and love, for thus you can be situated in transcendental devotional service. The word Parameshtinam is sometimes used in connection with Brahma. Parameshti means the Supreme Person. As Brahma is the Supreme Person within this universe, Krishna is the Supreme Personality in the spiritual world. Lord Kapila advises his mother that she should take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna because it is worthwhile. Taking shelter of the demigods, even those in the higher positions like Brahma and Shiva, is not advised herein. One should take shelter of the Supreme Godhead. Sarva Bhavena means in all loving ecstasy. Bhava is the preliminary stage of elevation before the attainment of pure love of Godhead. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita, Buddha Bhava Samanvita. One who has attained the stage of Bhava can accept the lotus feet of Lord Krishna as worshipable. This is also advised here by Lord Kapila to his mother. Also significant in this verse is the phrase tad gunashraya bhaktya. This means that discharging devotional service under Kṛṣṇa is transcendental. It is not material activity. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Those who engage in devotional service are accepted to be situated in the spiritual kingdom. Brahma bhūyāya kalpate. They at once become situated in the transcendental kingdom. Devotional service in full Krishna consciousness is the only means for attaining the highest perfection of life for the human being. This is recommended herein by Lord Kapila to his mother. Bhakti is therefore nirguna, free from all tinges of material qualities. Although the discharge of devotional service appears to be like material activities, it is never saguna or contaminated by material activities. Tadgunashraya means that Lord Krishna's transcendental qualities are so sublime that there is no need to divert one's attention to any other activities. His behavior with the devotees is so exalted that a devotee need not try to divert his attention to any other worship. It is said that the demoniac Putana came to kill Kṛṣṇa by poisoning him, but because Kṛṣṇa was pleased to suck her breast, she was given the same position as his mother. Devotees pray, therefore, that if a demon who wanted to kill Kṛṣṇa gets such an exalted position, why should they go to anyone other than Kṛṣṇa for their worshipful attachment? There are two kinds of religious activities, one for material advancement and the other for spiritual advancement. By taking shelter under the lotus feet of Kṛṣṇa, one is endowed with both kinds of prosperity, material and spiritual. Why then should one go to any demigod? Engagement in Krishna consciousness and application of devotional service under Kṛṣṇa make it possible to advance in knowledge and detachment as well as in self-realization. It is said by less intelligent men that bhakti yoga or devotional service is meant for persons who are not advanced in transcendental knowledge and renunciation. But the fact is that if one engages in the devotional service of the Lord in full Krishna consciousness, he does not have to attempt separately to practice detachment or to wait for an awakening of transcendental knowledge. It is said that one who engages unflinchingly in the devotional service of the Lord actually has all the good qualities of the demigods develop in him automatically. One cannot discover how such good qualities develop in the body of a devotee, but actually it happens. There's one instance where a hunter was taking pleasure in killing animals, but after becoming a devotee, he was not prepared to kill even an ant. Such is the quality of a devotee. Those who are very eager to advance in transcendental knowledge can engage themselves in pure devotional service without wasting time in mental speculation. For arriving at the positive conclusions of knowledge in the absolute truth, the word Brahmadarshanam is significant in this verse. Brahmadarshana means to realize or to understand the transcendence. One who engages in the service of Vasudeva can actually realize what Brahman is. If Brahman is impersonal, then there is no question of darshanam, which means seeing face to face. Darshanam refers to seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva. Unless the seer and the seen are persons, there is no darshanam. Brahmadarshana means that as soon as one sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can at once realize what impersonal Brahman is. A devotee does not need to make separate investigations to understand the nature of Brahman. Bhagavad Gita also confirms this. Brahma bhūyāya kalpate. A devotee at once becomes a self-realized soul in the absolute truth. The exalted devotee's mind becomes equipoised in sensory activities, and he is transcendental to that which is agreeable and not agreeable. The significance of advancement in transcendental knowledge and detachment from material attraction is exhibited in the personality of a highly advanced devotee. For him there is nothing agreeable or disagreeable, because he does not act in any way for his personal sense gratification. Whatever he does, whatever he thinks, is for the satisfaction of the personality of Godhead, either in the material world or the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, his equipoised mind is completely manifested. He can understand that in the material world there is nothing good. Everything is bad due to its being contaminated by material nature. The materialist's conclusions of good and bad, moral and immoral, etc., are simply mental concoction or sentiment. Actually, there is nothing good in the material world. In the spiritual field, everything is absolutely good. There is no inebriety in the spiritual varieties. Because a devotee accepts everything in spiritual vision, he is equipoised. That is a symptom of his being elevated to the transcendental position. He automatically attains detachment, vairagya, then jnana, knowledge, and then actual transcendental knowledge. The conclusion is that an advanced devotee dovetails himself in the transcendental qualities of a Lord, and in that sense he becomes qualitatively one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because of his transcendental intelligence, the pure devotee is equipoised in his vision and sees himself to be uncontaminated by matter. He does not see anything as superior or inferior, and he feels himself elevated to the transcendental platform of being equal in qualities with the Supreme Person. Perception of the disagreeable arises from attachment. A devotee has no personal attachment to anything. Therefore, for him, there is no question of agreeable or disagreeable. For the service of the Lord, he can accept anything, even though it may be disagreeable to his personal interest. In fact, he is completely free from personal interest, and thus anything agreeable to the Lord is agreeable to him. For example, for Arjuna, at first fighting was not agreeable, but when he understood that the fighting was agreeable to the Lord, he accepted the fighting as agreeable. That is the position of a pure devotee. For his personal interest, there is nothing which is agreeable or disagreeable. Everything is done for the Lord, and therefore he is free from attachment and detachment. That is the transcendental stage of neutrality. A pure devotee enjoys life in the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Personality of Godhead alone is complete transcendental knowledge, but according to the different processes of understanding, he appears differently, either as impersonal Brahman, as Paramatma, or as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or as the Purusha avatar. Purport: the word drishyadibi is significant. According to Jiva Goswami, drishi means jnana, philosophical research. By different processes of philosophical research under different concepts, such as the process of Jnana Yoga, the same Bhagavan, or Supreme Personality of Godhead, is understood as impersonal Brahman. Similarly, by the Eightfold Yoga system, he appears as the Paramatma. But in pure Krishna consciousness, or knowledge in purity, when one tries to understand the absolute truth, one realizes him as the Supreme Person. The transcendence is realized simply on the basis of knowledge. The words used here are Paramatmeshvara Puman. The words used here are all transcendental, and they refer to Supersoul. Supersoul is also described as Purusha, but the word Bhagavan directly refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It was full of 6 opulences: wealth, fame, strength, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. He is the personality of Godhead in different spiritual skies. The various descriptions of Paramatma, Ishvar, and Puman indicate that the expansions of the Supreme Godhead are unlimited. Ultimately, to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one has to accept Bhakti Yoga. By executing Jnana Yoga or Dhyana Yoga, one has to eventually approach the Bhakti platform. And then Paramatma, Ishvar, Puman, etc. are all clearly understood. It is recommended in the 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that whether one is a devotee or a fruitive actor or liberationist, if he is intelligent enough, he should engage himself with all seriousness in the process of devotional service. It is also explained that whatever one desires, which is obtainable by fruitive activities, even if one wants to be elevated to higher planets, can be achieved simply by execution of devotional service. Since the Supreme Lord is full in 6 opulences, he can bestow any one of them upon the worshipper. The one Supreme Personality of Godhead reveals himself to different thinkers as the Supreme Person or impersonal Brahman, or Paramatma. Impersonalists merge into the impersonal Brahman, but that is not achieved by worshipping the impersonal Brahman. If one takes to devotional service and at the same time desires to merge into the existence of the Supreme Lord, he can achieve that. If someone desires at all to merge into the existence of the Supreme, he has to execute devotional service. The devotee can see the Supreme Lord face to face, but the Jnani, the empiric philosopher or yogi, cannot. They cannot be elevated to the positions of associates of the Lord. There is no evidence in the scriptures stating that by cultivating knowledge or worshipping the impersonal Brahman, one can become a personal associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nor by executing the yogic principles can one become an associate of the Supreme Godhead. Impersonal Brahman, being formless, is described as adrishya, because the impersonal effulgence of Brahmajyoti covers the face of the Supreme Lord. Some yogis see the four-handed Vishnu sitting within the heart, and therefore it is their case also. And therefore, in their case also, the Supreme Lord is invisible. Only for the devotees is the Lord visible. Here the statement drishyadi is significant. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is both invisible and visible, there are different features of the Lord. The Paramatma feature and Brahman feature are invisible, but the Bhagavan feature is visible. In the Vishnu Purana, this fact is very nicely explained. The universal form of the Lord and the formless Brahman effulgence of the Lord being invisible are inferior features. The concept of the universal form is material, and the concept of impersonal Brahman is spiritual, but the highest spiritual understanding is the personality of Godhead. The Vishnu Purana states, Vishnu Brahma Swarupena Swayam Eva Vyavastita. Brahman's real feature is Vishnu, or the Supreme Brahman is Vishnu. Swayameva, that is his personal feature. The supreme spiritual conception is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Yadgatvana Nirvartante to Dhamma Paramamama. That specific abode called Paramamama is the place from which once one attains it, one does not return to this miserable conditional life. Every place, every space, and everything belongs to Vishnu. Every place and every space, everything belongs to you. But where he personally lives is Tadhamma Paramam, his supreme abode. One has to make one's destination the supreme abode of the Lord. We'll take a couple comments or questions. Yes, Pranhari Prabhu. And then Mahendra Prabhu. Then Samya Pras.
I have 2 questions. One is in regards to what we heard in this purport, how even attainment of Sayuja Mukti and other inferior attainments than bhakti or prema, they depend on the performance of devotional service. They depend on bhakti. And I was curious, we hear that a lot, and I don't have any shlokas, any verses coming to mind. I was wondering if you have any.
There's some in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that directly state that. Others say it in another way, like the last verse in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Edeshu yagyeshu tapasu chaiva. I mean, it's not saying directly that, but there are many indications. Bhaktis tvayi sthirataya bhagavan yadi syad dayevena nat kaishora divya kishora mukti swayam mukalitanjali sevate swan dharmartha kama gataya something pratiksha. There's a way in which many of the verses are saying everything else makes itself available to the Lord, including liberation and so forth. Will that work for you?
Sure.
For now?
Sure, of course.
Okay. Who's next? Mahendra.
One more question.
Okay.
We heard a few verses back about Srila Prabhupada was mentioning in the purport about how other literatures or other subject matters the devotee feels are they're like refuse. You know, the stool-eating hog was given as the example, I think, in the verse. Anything other than Krishna conscious discussion or literature, things like that. So, I mean, in the first canto, this verse na yad vachaschitra padam harer yasho also says that these other literatures, or literature is a stand-in for any other way to, I don't know, hear about or meditate on something other than Krishna. So it's described as the tirtha for the crows. The transcendentalists don't take pleasure in that, but then I guess my question is there any instance or precedent for devotees engaging with anything that's quote-unquote mundane? Because we have, several examples where devotees can utilize seemingly mundane literature in the service of Krishna, and also it gives them, because of dint of their intention, some sort of it's like an udipan, stimulates their own remembrance of Krishna, even if it's not directly sourced. So I don't know if that's my question, what's the precedent or what's our scope for that? Is it all or nothing, or is there some sort of nuance to it?
There's some sort of nuance to it. Well, if one's Krishna conscious, then such a person will see Krishna within everything. And the prerequisite is that one's Krishna conscious. For instance, if one hears a song, let's pick one from Diana Ross. It says, "You are everything and everything is you." Then the devotees think, yeah, that's from the Bhagavad Gita. And although it may be a love song, the devotee hears it in that way. And as far as using things in Krishna's service, Chanakya Pandit is a politician, but there are ways in which some of those aphorisms are taken to give common sense guidance to people to navigate the material world so that they can be dutiful and be God conscious and so forth. And then, of course, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had his students study various doctrines. He was careful about it, but he wanted them to study various subject matters ad infinitum so that they could become authorities on it and then defeat the trendy ideas of the time using Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy. There can be ways in which the processes that people come up with can be helpful in organizing things so that one can be more efficient. But there can also be a point at which those become considered necessary in order to become Krishna conscious. In other words, oh yeah, this stuff isn't available so in the Bhagavatam, so I need this. There may be certain types of meditation. I have to go to a Vipassana yoga in order to get my mind steady enough to chant Hare Krishna, or things like that. So there is a consideration that one should be fully Krishna conscious, and when one's fully Krishna conscious, or at least has a guarded approach to everything, that this should be used in Krishna's service. Anything can be used in Krishna's service. Anasaktasya vishayan, but one should be careful not to drift into the mood of, well, this is more important than Krishna conscious, or it's a prerequisite for being Krishna conscious. Is that all right? Okay, a couple more. Who had their hands up? Mahendra did? And then Shami Pras. Okay.
It's about a statement Prabhupada made early in the chapter in text 5. That phrase caught my attention. They act, he's referring to devotees who perform their occupational duties for the pleasure of Krishna. They act as one is expected to act. And I just thought that persons who have had their bringing and they've been trained to act in a regular way and follow rules, it's easy there to act as they're expected. But for someone who comes from a culture where everything is irregular or chaotic, whatever, no such concept at all, even if one accepts Krishna consciousness and accepts the ideal goal, wants to do it, it could be difficult to act as it's expected to act. What would be your advice to work on developing the strength to be disciplined and act as expected? I was
just listening to a lecture of Prabhupada when I was getting ready for Mangalarti. He was talking about how animals can be trained a little bit. He said like a horse can be trained to jump over a fence, or dogs to roll over, he said. But he said human beings, they can be trained for anything, and especially for religious life. So that was Prabhupada's scheme. He had charted out ways in which he would have an institution that would inculcate these practices in the masses. And to some degree, it's worked very well. The only lack oftentimes is that the processes are not in place. When I first joined the temple, we had 5 classes a day. And nowadays, people are lucky if they get one a week. So it may take a little bit longer because it's more distant. But definitely people can be trained and come up to a higher standard. Otherwise, what are we doing? And that's one thing that Vyasadeva says in the Vedanta Sutra. He said, because all the Shastras are saying you can do this, you can do it. Shami Pras?
In the purport to verses 12 to 15, Srila Prabhupada says, all living entities other than the impersonalists and monists can directly take to devotional service and full Krishna consciousness. Such devotional service develops in the degrees of thinking of the Supreme Lord as Master, as Friend, as Son, and at last as Lover. Can you help me understand what Srila Prabhupada means by developing devotional service in degrees?
Was it mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion that, and also the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in which devotees generally have a sense for Shanta Ras. When they're first awakening to spiritual life, they feel the awesomeness of the Lord, and they feel His presence everywhere. And then there's an urge out of a sense of gratitude to do some service and think, well, He's so great, what can I do for Him? And okay, I can offer an apple. And then you come to Dasya Ras, and by ways of association, and as Prema Manjari was saying in her excellent class this morning, ways in which one may get expert direction from those who are already in the higher levels, then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste for those things. And especially by hearing. And then one starts to develop a taste tanama rupa charitadu sukirtanano smrityo kramena rasanana manasi niyoja tishtam vraje tananuragujananagami kalam nayeda kilam itubadeshat saram. Starts with hearing, and then there's a sense of wanting to follow and so forth. Follow a particular mode of devotional service that's exemplified by a iconic character, one of the Parshadas. Oh, who was next? You were next with online, and then we're going to Prabhupada Priya. And then we're going to Krishna Saka.
This is from Apar Gaurangi Mataji. Hare Krishna, dear Guru Maharaj, my respectful obeisances to you and all the devotees. I like the phrase transcendental neutrality. It was also mentioned how even though the pastimes of the Lord are real, people in general are more naturally attracted to fictions and novels, which are actually imaginary. Unless we had the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Vedic scriptures, we would have never known about the pastimes of the Lord. So it reminded me of what you often mention with respect to Srimad Bhagavatam. Quote, reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Unquote.
Oh, thank you. Was that Apar Gaurangi? Thanks, Apar Gaurangi. I mean, can you imagine, after what we heard last night, of appreciating a novel like Sense and Sensibilities or some romantic comedy, you're just going, no, careful. One's mind becomes fortified, and such productions, which are all thicken at the point boy meets girl and so on, they all seem ludicrous after hearing the third canto of the Bhagavatam. I'm sorry if we ruin it for anybody, but whoever heard the third canto of the Bhagavatam is now permanently inoculated from romantic comedies and stupid novels. And besides, they seem, even the self-help, even at the highest level of people who have degrees and so forth, and they start writing. I would say 99% of the books I've looked into, there's a way in which by the time you get to the third page of the second chapter, there's a mention of the premise of how this whole thing happened by evolution. It's always there. You go first chapter, good ideas. Second chapter, by the way, when we were hunter-gatherers on the savannah, and then somehow there we evolved, and the jaw changed, and the brain got bigger, and you're thinking, who is this guy? It's like having a friend, and you think, like, this guy's really smart, and you walk over one day, he's just smoking a cigarette, and you think, what an idiot. And I mean, it's really hard after the level of philosophy that we're hearing to appreciate a lot of these various disjointed and not very well put together philosophies. I told you I had to read this book called The Knowledge Illusion. It had a lot of nice points, and I got something out of it, which is nobody knows anything, especially me. And I had a group of devotees read it. We pulled it apart in different ways because I had to talk to this professor. And then I also ran it by the devotees of the BI, and they looked at all our notes, and they said, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He has no philosophy whatsoever. And we're associating with Jiva Goswami and Sanatana Goswami and high thinkers who are whose understanding of theism is unparalleled in the universe. How could you then go back and appreciate even Chitrapadam, those things that are highly decorated with, I was going to put in, like, literary ornaments. Prabhupada Priya.
Hare Krishna. As we were reading all those verses about all the different kinds of condemned people, basically, who are, going up and then coming back down and going up again and falling back down, it's a little distressful to think that so many people, and the majority of people, on this, what do they call it, Trivargika, just with no interest in God. And I was like, how can they not be interested in God? Like, how can you just put all of your faith and energy and time into these useless things. It's almost like inconceivable to me. Like, and thinking that that's all there is to life. Like, how do you go on like that? Where does your inspiration even come from? It's just frustration and disappointment after frustration and disappointment. It's like, yeah, how can somebody not be interested in the real self and the Lord?
Could you answer that?
It's just Māyā, you know. It's just Māyā is so strong and so thickly covering everyone.
Yeah. There's always this sense of it's just around the corner. It reminds me, Prahlad's prayer, Kutra Shusha Shuti Sukham Rigatrishni Rupa Kvedam Kaleva Namashesha Rujam Biroha, where he says, Kutra. So everyone's talking about getting happiness, but where is it? They didn't actually get it. They're only Hari. They're only talking about it. It's like a mirage. It's always receding.
Yeah, I was literally getting distressed hearing about all these people, and then I was finally got some relief when we got to text 22. You know, Tasmat Tvam Sarvabhavena Bhajasva Parameshtita. I was like, yes, now we're talking. And then the next verse is interesting. It's almost the same as 127. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayati Ashuvairagyam Gyanam Yad Brahmadarshanam. It just adds that little thing on the end that not only do we get knowledge and detachment, but we also get to see the Lord.
Nice. Okay, Kṛṣṇa Saka, and then we're going to Anapayini. I really like that verse where it said, sometimes you see that people in a very high position just suddenly fall. Yeah. They were there, and then like, what happened? Yeah. Just gone.
Guru Maharaj, it is said, not to worship Shiva and Kali. We hear a lot of time, and even in Bhagavatam in verses. But then we hear that you can chant Jehovah or Allah. So what is like?
And all are names of God. But then, if you have this misconception that there are various others entities who are not God, or they're all the same, Brahma, Rudra, Daivatai, that they're demigods, but let's just put them all in the same basket, then that becomes a problem. But when we worship, there's no problem worshiping demigods, even asking them for benediction, as long as the benediction is, can you help me serve Krishna more? Rukmini did it, the gopis did it, and Mahaprabhu went here, there, and everywhere and saw all kinds of temples when he was crisscrossing South India. But it was never like, you're the same, everything's the same. He was always respectful in that they were the servants of the Lord. As long as you have that conception, then we respectfully offer them obeisance. Even Gopishwar Mahadev, everyone goes there. He protects the Dham. He's one of the spiritual power centers of the Dham too, where one can get potency because he's a devotee of the Lord. Vaishnavana Mita Shambhu.
Jehovah and Allah, it's not mentioned anywhere, right? They are names of God.
Jehovah's mentioned. Never heard of the Jehovah's Witness? You never heard Allah Akbar? Yeah, there are millions of people in the world who worship God and they call him Allah. And then there's another group of people called the Jehovah's Witness. They sell Watchtower magazine. Pick up a copy on any corner. And you'll find out it says Jehovah as a name of God. They're indicative of the Supreme. And some of them are very bhakti-centric in the sense that it all comes from grace. There's one God, monotheistic, it's coming down. So they have those tendencies and those ideas rather than, somebody else it's all one Mayavad idea. They don't have complete information, a lot of these people, and they have tons of misinformation too. But definitely has some sentiment for the Supreme God who's almighty. All right? Anapayini? Okay, first one's free.
So in the commentary on the 11th verse, there is an explanation how in transcendental world the servant and master and one, And I thought about Nija Nikata Nivasam, Dehi Govardhana, the last line of this Govardhana Vasa Pratna Dasakam. Yeah, Nija Nikata Nivasam, Dehi Govardhanatam. In one sense, it's a prayer. This line indicates a prayer to give the residence. But another sense also, Madhavananda Prabhu explains it according to Sanskrit, that it's please give me the qualities, the same qualities you possess. And I just was wondering if it's the same oneness which meant in this commentary, like oneness of qualities. So when the servant serves the guru,
well, that's already there. It's eternally there. We have the qualities of the Lord, minus a few little points. And so when we become freed from the coverings, those qualities shine forth. Narada mentions it in his teachings to Vyasadeva, when he tells him that after I got benedicted by those sages, then I realized I'm the same as the Lord, qualitatively, not quantitatively. But that's a revelation, and the oneness we discussed a little earlier is a oneness in purpose. They have no separate interest except my only interest is in whatever the Lord wants. That's what I want. Prema Manjari mentioned it in the class this morning. We talked about it mostly in terms of coming down through the order of the spiritual master. That's it. I'm not interested in anything else. I don't even care about suffering. I only want that. And that's one-mindedness mentioned in that verse that says, Vayam dvitiya bini besha tasyad ishat apetasya viparya yosmriti tanmaya tad buddha abhijatam bhaktyayika yesham guru devatatma. The word eka is that one is fully fixed on the order of the spiritual master. That's how one turns around that sense of being away from the Lord. So the one-mindedness is the oneness.
Thank you. That answer the second question as well.
That answered both?
Yeah.
All three at once? Two, okay.
Thank you.
I thought you had three.
Actually, maybe it's a question. So in the next verse, not next verse, but the 23rd verse in the commentary, it says that the one who engages unflinchingly in the devotional service of the Lord actually has all the good qualities of demigods developed in him automatically. So it's kind of similar topic, but it says unflinchingly, and I'm just thinking practically, looking back in my life and right now. So I don't know when this unflinchingly will happen in my life, and it's never happened before. So does it mean that those qualities were never developed?
Well, you're obviously already developing them. I mean, you have an illustrious life, and you're engaged in devotional service, and even now you're expressing humility. That I don't have any qualities. I hate to break it to you, but it could be happening without you knowing. Yeah, all good qualities come. Obviously, yasyasti bhaktir bhagavatiya kinchana. And in the Nectar Devotion, when Rupa Goswami quotes that verse, then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Jiva Goswami say it has the meaning that the devotee develops such qualities by worshiping Krishna that even the devas want to live with them because they appreciate it so much. And in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, the disappearance of Lord Krishna, there's a long list of Krishna's qualities. When they're lamenting Krishna's departure, he in whom, and then there's a list of about 50 or 60 qualities of Krishna. Now we're bereft of all those. But the idea behind the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna Svabhadamo Pakate Dharma Ganadi Bisaha Kalun Ashta Drishamesha Puranarko Donodita, even though Krishna's disappeared, all those qualities are available to one who associates with him by hearing. So be very careful, because if you hear enough and you continue in the process, then there's a way in which all your anarthas you may look one day and say, what happened? They're all gone. Inevitable. Okay, now we have one last point from Mahendra, and then we're going to take a short break.
Haribo? Okay. To the worship of demigods, just I remember the section where Mahaprabhu displays this, in the theater, not displays, but he tells devotees, now I want to perform a drama where I'll play my energy, and then he's playing Rukmini and the internal energy and the external. When he takes the form of Mahamaya, devotees start offering prayers, like 15 verses praying to Mahamaya, and then they say in one of the verses you are Vishnu Bhakti personification, and just by remembering you give devotion and you purify the mantras for worshipping Krishna. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains that Krishna empowered Mahamaya to be in charge of the mantras and actually, purify and bless. So if you have that, and then also he explains that materialists or Shaktas or whatever, even impersonalists, they worship demigods, especially Shiva and Durga, and they want to make them their servants by fulfilling their desires. But devotees, if they worship like Sanatana Goswami is going every day to Gopeshwar Mahadev, they just want bhakti. And it's good to have, not just be respectful, but be prayerful to those who are the most powerful and the greatest devotees to bless you.
Yeah, we learned so much from Mahaprabhu, what our relationship is with everyone. He gives that very clearly, and as Prabhupada mentions in his commentary to where the Brahma Samhita is quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that the Sri Brahma Samhita, did I say? The Sri Brahma Samhita gives us a template for understanding the relationship of all the primary devas. At Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Jami, even the sense of Ganesh, which Prabhupada is, and it also shows the importance of having the Acharya to give the finer details, because there's a sentence in the Nectar Devotion that says one should begin worshipping Ganesh immediately. And some devotees like, yeah, let's do that. And there were a couple sannyasis who were successfully collecting a lot of money with their team in Japan, and they had, along with their worship of Gaura Nitai, they also started worshiping Ganesh. And so, because they were high profile, and so a lot of people started saying, we want to worship Ganesh too. And they wrote Prabhupada, and Prabhupada wrote back a letter to one of the devotees and said, if you can give $80,000 a month, you can also start worshiping Ganesh.
And we had a few months, I think we did 80,000.
Yeah. And half of it came from Bhanabhata Prabhu, as you can imagine. Now we'll take a little break. We'll come back at 15 after. Om Tat Sat. Thanks, everyone. See you in a few minutes.